Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone.
She left.
Yeah. Yep, I put the computer on for Gina, so she can watch. Alright, so we did chapter 4 this week. It's on knowledge, evidence, and errors in thinking. I hope you read it, even though we have the writing assignment, quiz, and no scavenger hunt. If not, please go back and definitely read this. The objectives of this chapter were to learn about the limitations to human knowledge, perception, and memory. We talked about our personalities, our wants, our desires, our actions being hardwired into us. There might be a certain way our brain works and remembers things that is efficient for our survival, but not necessarily as accurate as taking a picture of an event or recording every detail. We tend to filter out a lot of distractions and take what's important to us at that moment. And in that, there are errors in what we remember, what we think, and how we reason. We're going to talk about evaluating evidence and other sources of information. This is, apart from our memory and our psychology, this is a purely academic study of when we're writing and researching how to tell if the information we're looking at is good. There's certainly a lot of garbage on the web. There's also a lot of very useful information from organizations and academic resources. We're going to look at how we might be able to tell the difference. And we're going to look at the errors in our perception and talk about the social consequences of the fact that we are built this way. What is reality? We all wake up, we open our eyes, we see colors if our eyes function normally. Pick out an outfit, we get on with our day. So it may be very different than how other living things in the world experience life. Fish only sleep on one half of their brain at once. They don't have an experience of waking up. When does their day start and end? Their reality is much different than ours. Dogs don't see color at all. On the other hand, they can smell much, much better. So when we look at food and it's a certain color and we know it's ripe, a dog might look at something and be able to tell by the smell if it's safe to eat. What are our senses telling us, and what does that do for us in terms of our survival and our success as a species? I want to read you an excerpt from page 103 before we watch this video. It's about the structure of the mind. German philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that how we experience reality is not simply a matter of pure reason, which would be rationalism, or of using physical senses, which would be empiricism, but it depends on the structure of our mind. Like computers, which are designed to accept and process particular kinds of input from the outside world, our brains must have the correct hardware to accept and make sense of incoming data. Most neurologists believed, as did Kant, that we really do not see reality directly as it is, but that instead, our mind and brain provide structure and rules for processing incoming information. In other words, we interpret our experiences rather than directly perceiving the world out there. One example I can give this is the W, and what is reality? We see that as a W. We've been trained to recognize that as what it means something to us. We don't look at it as, oh, maybe it's icicles, or maybe the thing in the middle is a mountain. It's a bunch of lines, but we don't have to think about what it might be. We just are geared to know it's a W. Most times in our life when we encounter that on a flat surface, that's what it means. We don't think critically about this. We don't need to. We don't think why it's there, how it got there, why it's like that. It just is more efficient for us to be like, that's a W, what comes next, and we read. It's a very simple example, but when you apply that to other things in life, it's endlessly complex. Like most matter, like hard tables, like that's more empty space between neurons than it is actual matter. But we perceive it as a solid surface because for all intents and purposes, we can't pass our hand right through it. The fact that there's empty space in there, it doesn't mean anything to us. It's not relevant to our lives. So let's look at a speech about exploring these gaps in our perception, exploring the things that we never think about, and wondering what they mean as far as the meaning of life and the meaning of the universe. Now this guy is not sure what you deem this field of study that he's in. I didn't understand everything he said. You won't either, but it's definitely worth examining because this is, a couple levels deeper than what the textbook is getting at when it says that reality is merely a perception that helps us to function. I need to help you guys out on the worksheet here and figure out what numbers we're actually doing.
1 and 2.
Yeah, I'd love a copy of that. Where did I put them? Did I leave those on someone's desk? Oh, these? Oh. Here they are. Okay. Yep, 1 and 2.
Because there's no numbers.
Yes, I apologize for that. Feel free to write them in.
1 and 2, what? Say.
The questions on this worksheet will be answered in the video we're about to watch.
Only the first 2.
Yes.
It's all the way up.
Let's see what we have going back here. That first one.
I love a great mystery, and I'm fascinated by the greatest unsolved mystery in science. Perhaps because it's personal. It's about who we are, and I can't help but be curious. The mystery is this: what is the relationship between your brain and your conscious experiences, such as your experience of the taste of chocolate or the feeling of velvet? Now, this mystery is not new. In 1868, Thomas Huxley wrote, "How it is that anything so remarkable as a state of consciousness comes about as the result of irritating nervous tissue is just as unaccountable as the appearance of the genie when Aladdin rubbed his lamp." Now, Huxley knew that brain activity and conscious experiences are correlated, but he didn't know why. To the science of his day, it was a mystery. In the years since Huxley, science has learned a lot about brain activity, but the relationship between brain activity and conscious experiences is still a mystery. Why? Why have we made so little progress? Well, some experts think that we can't solve this problem because we lack the necessary concepts and intelligence. We don't expect monkeys to solve problems in quantum mechanics, and as it happens, we can't expect our species to solve this problem either. Well, I disagree. I'm more optimistic. I think we've simply made a false assumption. Once we fix it, we just might solve this problem. Today I'd like to tell you what that assumption is, why it's false, and how to fix it. Let's begin with a question. Do we see reality as it is? I open my eyes, and I have an experience that I describe as a red tomato a meter away. As a result, I come to believe that in reality, there's a red tomato a meter away. I then close my eyes, and my experience changes to a gray field. But is it still the case that in reality, there's a red tomato a meter away? I think so. But could I be wrong? Could I be misinterpreting the nature of my perceptions? We've misinterpreted our perceptions before. We used to think the Earth is flat because it looks that way. Pythagoras discovered that we were wrong. Then we thought that the Earth is the unmoving center of the universe, again because it looks that way. Copernicus and Galileo discovered, again, that we were wrong. Galileo then wondered if we might be misinterpreting our experiences in other ways. He wrote, "I think that tastes, odors, colors, and so on reside in consciousness, Hence, if the living creature were removed, all these qualities would be annihilated.
Alright, so that's pretty deep. Let's think about that for a second. Taste, colors, and odors only exist because we perceive them. Odors are molecules in the air, but they only smell because they match up with receptors in our sinuses that send a neuron to the brain that signifies that that thing is present. Otherwise, it's a piece of matter. The smell comes from our interpretation of it. Colors come from light bouncing off objects and vibrating at a certain wavelength where the cones in our eyes break it into a spectrum of what we perceive as colors. Some animals don't have those. Some animals, I think it's the mantis shrimp, sees like 1,000 colors. Things that we can't even imagine because there's no spot in our brain for that color to live. Without the mantis shrimp existing, many of those colors might not exist in the world because no other animal can perceive them at all. Taste is, the same as smell. We're detecting a molecule, but in and of itself, it's just a structure of organ, or what are they called? Structure of atoms that, doesn't necessarily taste like anything to the world around it. These things only exist because the brain interprets it, and there's a reason for that interpretation, like we learned last class. Chocolate cake is sweet because sugar signifies high energy foods, usually fruits like apples and cranberries, things that would keep our caveman ancestors going longer than something bland like grass and wheat. So I think that was really something to think about, that those things in our head, we are what give those things meaning. Without it, it's just stuff.
That's a stunning claim. Could Galileo be right? Could we really be misinterpreting our experiences that badly? What does modern science have to say about this? Well, neuroscientists tell us that about 1/3 of the brain's cortex is engaged in vision. When you simply open your eyes and look about this room, billions of neurons and trillions of synapses are engaged. Now this is a bit surprising because to the extent that we think about vision at all, we think of it as like a camera. It just takes a picture of objective reality as it is. Now, there is a part of vision that's like a camera. The eye has a lens that focuses an image on the back of the eye where there are 130 million photoreceptors. So the eye is like a 130 megapixel camera. But that doesn't explain the billions of neurons and trillions of synapses that are engaged in vision. What are these neurons up to? Well, neuroscientists tell us that they're creating, in real time, all the shapes, objects, colors, and motions that we see. It feels like we're just taking a snapshot of this room the way it is, but in fact, we're constructing everything that we see. We don't construct the whole world at once. We construct what we need in the moment. Now, there are many demonstrations that are quite compelling that we construct what we see. I'll just show you two. In this example, you see some red discs with bits cut out of them. But if I just rotate the discs a little bit, suddenly you see a 3D cube pop out of the screen. Now the screen, of course, is flat, so the three-dimensional cube that you're experiencing must be your construction. In this next example, you see glowing blue bars with pretty sharp edges moving across a field of dots. In fact, no dots move. All I'm doing from frame to frame is changing the colors of dots from blue to black or black to blue. But when I do this quickly, your visual system creates the glowing blue bars with the sharp edges and the motion. There are many more examples, but these are just two that you construct what you see. But neuroscientists go further. They say that we reconstruct reality. So when I have an experience that I describe as a red tomato, that experience is actually an accurate reconstruction of the properties of a real red tomato that would exist even if I weren't looking. Now, why would neuroscientists say that we don't just construct, we reconstruct? Well, the standard argument given is usually an evolutionary one. Those of our ancestors who saw more accurately had a competitive advantage compared to those who saw less accurately, and therefore they were more likely to pass on their genes. We're the offspring of those who saw more accurately, and so we can be confident that, in the normal case, our perceptions are accurate. You see this in the standard textbooks. One textbook says, for example, evolutionarily speaking, vision is useful precisely because it's so accurate. So the idea is that accurate perceptions are fitter perceptions. They give you a survival advantage. Now, is this correct? Is this the right interpretation of evolutionary theory? Well, let's first look at a couple of examples in nature. The Australian jewel beetle is dimpled, glossy, and brown.
That's what question one
The
is.
female is flightless. The male fly is looking, of course, for a hot female. When he finds one, he alights and mates. There's another species in the outback, Homo sapiens. The male of this species has a massive brain that he uses to hunt for cold beer. And when he finds one, he drains it and sometimes throws the bottle into the outback. Now, as it happens, these bottles are dimpled, glossy, and just the right shade of brown to tickle the fancy of these beetles. The males swarm all over the bottles, trying to mate. They lose all interest in the raw females. Classic case of the male leaving the female for the bottle. The species almost went extinct. Australia had to change its bottles to save its beetles. Now, the males had successfully found females for thousands, perhaps millions of years. It looked like they saw reality as it is, but apparently not. Evolution had given them a hack. A female is anything dimpled, glossy, and brown. The bigger the better. Even when crawling all over the bottle, the male couldn't discover his mistake. Now you might say, beetles, sure. They're very simple creatures, but surely not mammals. Mammals don't rely on tricks. Well, I won't dwell on this, but you get the idea. So this raises an important technical question. Does natural selection really favor seeing reality as it is? Fortunately, we don't have to wave our hands and guess. Evolution is a mathematically precise theory. We can use the equations of evolution to check this out. We can have various organisms in artificial worlds compete and see which survive and which thrive, which sensory systems are more fit. A key notion in those equations is fitness. Consider this steak. What does this steak do for the fitness of an animal? Well, for a hungry lion looking to eat, it enhances fitness. For a well-fed lion looking to mate, it doesn't enhance fitness. And for a rabbit in any state, it doesn't enhance fitness. So fitness does depend on reality as it is, yes, but also on the organism, its state, and its action. Fitness is not the same thing as reality as it is, and it's fitness and not reality as it is that figures centrally in the equations of evolution. So in my lab, we have run hundreds of thousands of evolutionary game simulations with lots of different randomly chosen worlds and organisms that compete for resources in those worlds. Some of the organisms see all of the reality, others see just part of the reality, and some see none of the reality, only fitness. Who wins? Well, I hate to break it to you, but perception of reality goes extinct. In almost every simulation, organisms that see none of reality but are just tuned to fitness drive to extinction all the organisms that perceive reality as it is. So the bottom line is evolution does not favor vertical or accurate perceptions. Those perceptions of reality go extinct.
Okay, I wanted to pause it there just for a second and talk about some of the denser stuff that he went over. Kim, I wanted to point out to you that as far as computer programming and application software goes, he proved his thesis by creating a computer model of different species. Obviously, the functions of the computer that had more information to process moved slower and didn't get the food or survival tokens, or they weren't able to collect the data and progress as fast as the other ones. So, much nicer way to do that than inhibiting lab rats, right?
Yeah.
Just use a computer model to show the logical progression of having to perceive and sort everything versus only seeing the things that point you towards your goal. I thought that was a really great use of computers, and I was happy for the lab rats in that. So you talked about some hardwired things in a beetle, and then we saw that it transferred to a buffalo, so we know that it transcends the bug kingdom where they're kind of just like little mini organic robots, and it does affect mammals. And then I tried to think like how might we be tricked? I mean, clearly I barely feel like we're even mating with the strongest, necessarily most powerful mates we can find at this point, because we value things like personality, common childhoods, history, these types of things. We don't have boxing matches to pick our mates like they do in the wild. So how might we be tricked by things that are getting put in front of us that we think are something else? And the biggest thing I could think of was GMOs. That stuff really, really freaks me out, and I'm really trying to change my diet, but as much as I do, like, I don't feel like I can go to the grocery store and know that I'm picking up a pepper and that it has everything in it that a pepper should. Was it grown in the lab? Did it see the real sunshine? Did it even have dirt in it to getting minerals? Like, we don't know. They've tricked us with the way the molecules are arranged so it tastes like pepper. It looks like pepper, but are we a jewel beetle on a bottle when we go to the store and we buy these things that our bodies have evolved to like that taste, like that color, like everything about a pepper or a tomato, because deep down our evolution knows those are nutrients we need. That has certain minerals in it. That has certain things that our body needs. But when it interferes with GMO and hydroponic lettuce, is like it's never in the ground. It never actually absorbs those minerals. And the tools that we've been given by nature, like our sight and our taste and our smell, they don't know. They might be tricked. Like that might be the dimpled bottle to the jewel beetle, is that we literally can't tell that we're not getting what we think we're getting when we're attracted to that piece of food. So, freaked me out even more about GMOs. I mean, it's not like we can look at it and see the molecules inside of it and see that it has a certain iron content and enough vitamin D for what kind of fruit it's supposed to be. And so yeah, I basically concluded we're not immune to that. We're not immune to false triggers to satisfy what we think are survival needs.
Now this is a bit stunning. How can it be that not seeing the world accurately gives us a survival advantage? That is a bit counterintuitive. But remember the jewel beetle. The jewel beetle survived for thousands, perhaps millions of years using simple tricks and hacks. What the equations of evolution are telling us is that all organisms, including us, are in the same boat as the jewel beetle. We do not see reality as it is. We're shaped with tricks and hacks that keep us alive. Still, we need some help with our intuitions. How can not perceiving reality as it is be useful? Well, fortunately, we have a very helpful metaphor, the desktop interface on your computer. Consider that blue icon for a TED Talk that you're writing. Now, the icon is blue and rectangular and in the lower right corner of the desktop. Does that mean that the text file itself in the computer is blue, rectangular, and in the lower right-hand corner of the computer? Of course not. Anyone who thought that misinterprets the purpose of the interface. It's not there to show you the reality of the computer. In fact, it's there to hide that reality. You don't want to know about the diodes and resistors and all the megabytes of software. If you had to deal with that, you could never write your text file or edit your photo. So the idea is that evolution has given us an interface that hides reality and guides adaptive behavior. Space and time, as you perceive them right now, are your desktop. Physical objects are simply icons in that desktop. There's an obvious objection. Hoffman, if you think that train coming down the track at 200 miles an hour is just an icon of your desktop, why don't you step in front of it? And after you're gone and your theory with you, we'll know that there's more to that train than just an icon. Well, I wouldn't step in front of that train for the same reason that I wouldn't carelessly drag that icon to the trash can. Not because I take the icon literally. The file is not literally blue or rectangular. But I do take it seriously. I could lose weeks of work. Similarly, evolution has shaped us with perceptual symbols that are designed to keep us alive. We'd better take them seriously. If you see a snake, don't pick it up. If you see a cliff, don't jump off. They're designed to keep us safe, and we should take them seriously. That does not mean that we should take them literally. That's a logical error. Another objection. Now, there's nothing really new here. Physicists have told us for a long time that the metal of that train looks solid, but really it's mostly empty space with microscopic particles zipping around. There's nothing new here. Well, not exactly. It's like saying, I know that that blue icon on the desktop is not the reality of the computer, but if I pull out my trusty magnifying glass and look really closely, I see little pixels, and that's the reality of the computer. Well, not really. You're still on the desktop, and that's the point. Those microscopic particles are still in space and time. They're still in the user interface. So I'm saying something far more radical than those physicists. Finally, you might object. Look, we all see the train. Therefore, none of us constructs the train. But remember this example. In this example, we all see a cube. But the screen is flat. So the cube that you see is the cube that you construct. We all see a cube because each one of us constructs the cube that we see. The same is true of the train. We all see a train because we each see the train that we construct. And the same is true of all physical objects.
Okay, from there, I think he kind of repeats himself and doubles back around. So I'm gonna stop the video there. He gets kind of highfalutin on, is reality real, space and time? When we get in the infinite universe and things have different gravitational pulls and there's black holes, these are all things that make astronauts question what space and time really is. Is there time inside of a black hole? Light starts to bend. Light is theorized as traveling technically at the speed of time, since it's the fastest thing we can perceive at this point in our science. I'm a nerd. I read a lot of astrophysics stuff. I won't try to put a class discussion on that. But I think this also strikes at a religious level as well. One of the arguments, to follow up for my class about God, one of the arguments for the belief in God and for the belief in higher intelligence is, if these things are just constructs, if there are these holes, what fills in those holes? What is the space in between? How is it all possible? And ultimately, all getting back to the point of when everything was compressed into one tiny point in space, and then there was the Big Bang. What was space and time outside of that particle? Was there space? Was there time? If it's possible for those things to not exist, then what? Questions we might not see answered in our life, but definitely things to think on when your life feels stressful and you need to feel a little bit smaller to avoid your problems from, really taking you over. Just open it up to the mysteries of the universe. Okay, so we have questions 1 and 2 from that talk. Did everyone get them? Okay. Reflect. Reality is not about perceiving truth, but having kids. This is something that he ends up saying towards the end of his talk there. And what he means by this is that our reality and our perception of reality is ultimately about perpetuating our species. If we don't make it through our teenage years, as back in caveman days, being able to hunt and fend for yourself and go find a mate, human race as we know it is over. There is no more. We don't get to science. We don't get to philosophy, love, and all that. We don't get anything else after that. All of the human colors that we see and tastes that we've developed, those all cease to exist. The only way to perpetuate these beautiful things is to pass it on to a new generation. So I think we see in a lot of animals, but certainly still in humans, goal number one is definitely to mate and have kids and perpetuate stuff. And the more we realize that about ourselves, the more we might be able to parse out how we feel about things like, a lot of women in here, sorry, Demetrius, but like nesting, are we nesters? Do we want the house, and do we want to go to IKEA and furnish this house and build a home? Are men more likely to want to travel because that instinct was more like, let's see all the females out there? Maybe some of what we desire is linked to our gender and is linked to our role in perpetuating the species. Space, time, and objects do not exist as we perceive them. We merely perceive them in such a way that allows us to navigate reality as it really is. So certain colors that really stand out to us, like bright reds, bright yellows, bright oranges, they're really appealing. Those might signify ripe fruit to us. Those might, deep in our DNA, be encoded as us recognizing a food that is ready to eat. McDonald's certainly did that with the bold colors in their logo. Yellow is psychologically linked to certain foods, I forget which ones, and red signifies like meat, like blood, like they have hamburgers, and something in our psychology recognizes red as, good food, protein. And they certainly take advantage of those bright colors. Would we like McDonald's as much if the M was beige and the red part was just kind of like a milky, tan, gross brown color? Like, no, we'd have terrible associations with it. It would be more accurate to what color their food is, but we wouldn't be as attracted to it. In what ways might the jewel beetle, in what ways might we be a jewel beetle trying to mate with a beer bottle? To drive home this point, I stopped it during the video to explain that. And what is mental illness, really? That's certainly something to ponder, if perception is more of a subjective thing, more towards the individual and how they perceive the world, and less about there being one correct way to do it. What things might we think that are wrong with a person that might actually just be a different way of interpreting the environment around them? Certainly there's some perception differences between relationships and social pressure and what constitutes a good time, what constitutes a bad time when you have children that were abused or molested, or people that have come back from war with PTSD, people with drug addictions. Their brain starts to key information in a different way, and we look at this as an illness. But if the brain is wired to help you survive, are these things wired in that way to help that individual living thing get on with life, survive, ultimately, deep in our DNA, just to get them to the point of being able to mate and perpetuate their genes? But of course, as humans, we ascribe a lot of other meaning to life, not necessarily having children, but something to realize about the human mind there. Memory. We have some in-class questions here. It's going to be 3 and 4. Did we go on with her?
Nixon and Kennedy and Nixon debate.
I think it might extend to the Kennedy-Nixon debate. I'm sorry, I'm not totally sure. I'm a little lost. I never filled the numbers in. So if we read the chapter, we learned that memory is not necessarily accurate, that it self-serves, that it changes and morphs over time, and this talk discusses how it's surprisingly suggestive. If you watch a scene go down and somebody asks you what color shirt the person had on, you think back and like you might have to guess, you might actually remember. But yes.
That was on Channel 3, not Channel 3, but Channel 8. They were doing a study of, they did a thing that says, okay, if you saw this accident happen in the grocery store, somebody stole somebody's wallet, would you be able to identify what the guy looked like? And they're showing them how tips to memory and how to deal with it.
Yeah, but one trick that, and it's something I'm very aware of, is I'm trying to pursue a career in litigation and constantly analyzing police work. But you know, if you're to ask someone what color shirt did they have, you might get the right answer, they might guess. But if you were to say they had a blue shirt on, right? People are so much more likely to think back, and you've already suggested a color so that your memory fills it in, and that person can honestly, yes, I see them, they're in a blue shirt, they did it. It might be red. You know, we're not perfect and we're suggestive. Like we dream entire situations, entire stories, things we haven't lived through, just crazy stuff that we'd never think of sitting in a chair bored. We go to sleep and our brain goes crazy. There's so much we don't know, so many like plot twists in there that we're not perceiving as we go through our daily routine.
They're showing us how to
What they say?
They said, for one, if you look at the door frame as they go out, you can tell the height because the fact that they have it on their door hinge, they have like different slash marks, and that means different beat marks. So that's one.
They have that a lot on gas stations, right?
Gas
Because they
stations.
have the camera there, they want to be able to tell.
To tell how high, and then they tell you to always do a mental picture of what he looks like, or she, doesn't matter.
Okay, well, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I see studies like this all the time, and you know, it's definitely something to be aware of, even as you hear eyewitness accounts on the news of all sorts of events. So, yeah, we're gonna go through some fun stuff on this. This one is somebody that studies memory, studies these things, and you know, I especially liked it because she talks a lot about how it applies to court cases, how it applies to our criminal justice system, and that should be important to everybody because that could be you or a family member accused of a crime, and what are we really relying on? If you ever find yourself on a jury, it's something definitely important to keep in mind as well, that people's eyewitness testimonies are not surveillance cameras by any means.
I'd like to tell you about a legal case that I worked on involving a man named Steve Titus. Titus was a restaurant manager. He was 31 years old. He lived in Seattle, Washington. He was engaged to Gretchen, about to be married. She was the love of his life. And one night the couple went out for a romantic restaurant meal. They were on their way home, and they were pulled over by a police officer. You see, Titus's car sort of resembled a car that was driven earlier in the evening by a man who raped a female hitchhiker. And Titus kind of resembled that rapist. So the police took a picture of Titus. They put it in a photo lineup. They later showed it to the victim, and she pointed to Titus's photo. She said, "That one's the closest." The police and the prosecution proceeded with a trial, and when Steve Titus was put on trial for rape, the rape victim got on the stand and said, "I'm absolutely positive that's the man." And Titus was convicted. He proclaimed his innocence. His family screamed at the jury. His fiancée collapsed on the floor sobbing, and Titus is taken away to jail. So what would you do at this point? What would you do? Well, Titus lost complete faith in the legal system, and yet he got an idea. He called up the local newspaper. He got the interest of an investigative journalist, and that journalist actually found the real rapist, a man who ultimately confessed to this rape, a man who was thought to have committed 50 rapes in that area, and when this information was given to the judge set Titus free. And really, that's where this case should have ended. It should have been over. Titus should have thought of this as a horrible year, a year of accusation and trial, but over. It didn't end that way. Titus was so bitter. He'd lost his job, he couldn't get it back. He lost his fiancée, she couldn't put up with his persistent anger. He lost his entire savings, and so he decided to file a lawsuit against the police and others whom he felt were responsible for his suffering. And that's when I really started working on this case, trying to figure out how did that victim go from that one's the closest to I'm absolutely positive that's the guy. Well, Titus was consumed with his civil case as he spent every waking moment thinking about it, and just days before he was to have his day in court, he woke up in the morning, doubled over in pain, and died of a stress-related heart attack. He was 35 years old. So I was asked to work on Titus's case because I'm a psychological scientist. I study memory. I've studied memory for decades. And if I meet somebody on an airplane, this happened on the way over to Scotland, if I meet somebody on an airplane and we ask each other, what do you do, what do you do, and I say I study memory, they usually want to tell me how they have trouble remembering names, or they've got a relative who's got Alzheimer's or some kind of memory problem. But I have to tell them, I don't study when people forget. I study the opposite, when they remember. When they remember things that didn't happen, or remember things that were different from the way they really were. I study false memories. Unhappily, Steve Titus is not the only person to be convicted based on somebody's false memory. In one project in the United States, information has been gathered on 300 innocent people, 300 defendants who were convicted of crimes they didn't do. They spent 10, 20, 30 years in prison for these crimes, and now DNA testing has proven that they're actually innocent. And when those cases have been analyzed, 3/4 of them are due to faulty memory, faulty eyewitness memory. Well, why? Like the jurors who convicted those innocent people and the jurors who convicted Titus, many people believe that memory works like a recording device. You just record the information, then you call it up and play it back when you want to answer questions or identify images. But decades of work in psychology has shown that this just isn't true. Our memories are constructive. They're reconstructive. Memory works a little bit more like a Wikipedia page. You can go in there and change it, but so can other people. I first started studying this constructive memory process in the 1970s. I did my experiments that involved showing people simulated crimes and accidents and asking them questions about what they remember. In one study, we showed people a simulated accident, and we asked people how fast were the cars going when they hit each other.
This was exactly
And we
as the book
asked other
said.
people how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. And if we asked the leading smash question, the witnesses told us the cars were going faster. And moreover, that leading smash question caused people to be more likely to tell us that they saw broken glass in the accident scene when there wasn't any broken glass.
So when I worked in a, God bless you, in a plaintiff law firm where we did mostly car accidents, people that had been injured in the car accident were suing the other driver and the insurance, I always used the word collision. It sounds violent, it's not as casual as smash, but that is the word that was on every piece of discovery, every motion. The collision occurred at this time. After the collision, this happened. Everything that came in from the defense side, defending the driver, defending the insurance company, it was the accident. A way of describing a collision wherein no fault is placed on the party that essentially caused it or seemed to be at fault in the police report. So I've definitely encountered this in real life too when you're trying to make a point. Collision versus accident, it brings up two very different connotations of the same event.
At all. In another study, we showed a simulated accident where a car went through an intersection with a stop sign, and if we asked a question that insinuated it was a yield sign, many witnesses told us they remember seeing a yield sign at the intersection, not a stop sign. And you might be thinking, well, these are filmed events, they're not particularly stressful. Would the same kind of mistakes be made with a really stressful event? In the study we published just a few months ago, we have an answer to this question. Because what was unusual about this study is we arranged for people to have a very stressful experience. The subjects in the study were members of the U.S. military who were undergoing a harrowing training exercise to teach them what it's going to be like for them if they are ever captured as prisoners of war. And as part of this training exercise, these soldiers are interrogated in an aggressive, hostile, physically abusive fashion for 30 minutes. And later on, they have to try to identify the person who conducted that interrogation. And when we feed them suggestive information that insinuates it's a different person, many of them misidentify their interrogator,
Way different, right?
often identifying someone who
Would you have
doesn't
thought you'd
even
confuse those two
remotely
people?
resemble the real interrogator. And so what these studies are showing is that when you feed people misinformation about some experience that they may have had, you can distort or contaminate or change their memory. Well, out there in the real world, misinformation is everywhere. We get misinformation not only if we're questioned in a leading way, but if we talk to other witnesses who might consciously or inadvertently feed us some erroneous information, or if we see media coverage about some event we might have experienced. All of these provide the opportunity for this kind of contamination of our memory. In the 1990s, we began to see an even more extreme kind of memory problem. Some patients were going into therapy with one problem, maybe they had depression, eating disorder, and they were coming out of therapy with a different problem. Extreme memories for horrific brutalization, sometimes in satanic rituals, sometimes involving really bizarre and unusual elements. One woman came out of psychotherapy believing that she'd endured years of ritualistic abuse, where she was forced into a pregnancy and that the baby was cut from her belly. But there were no physical scars or any kind of physical evidence that could have supported her story. And when I began looking into these cases, I was wondering, where do these bizarre memories come from? And what I found is that most of these situations involved some particular form of psychotherapy. And so I asked, were some of the things going on in this psychotherapy, like the imagination exercises, or dream interpretation, or in some cases hypnosis, or in some cases exposure to false information, were these leading these patients to develop these very bizarre, unlikely memories? And I designed some experiments to try to study the processes that were being used in this psychotherapy so I could study the development of these very rich false memories. In one of the first studies we did, we used suggestion, a method inspired by the psychotherapy we saw in these cases. We used this kind of suggestion and planted a false memory that when you were a kid, 5 or 6 years old, you were lost in a shopping mall. You were frightened, you were crying, you were ultimately rescued by an elderly person and reunited with the family. And we succeeded in planting this memory in the minds of about a quarter of our subjects. And you might be thinking, well, that's not particularly stressful. But we and other investigators have planted rich false memories of things that were much more unusual and much more stressful. So in a study done in Tennessee, researchers planted the false memory that when you were a kid you nearly drowned and had to be rescued by a lifeguard. And in a study done in Canada, researchers planted the false memory that when you were a kid, something as awful as being attacked by a vicious animal happened to you, succeeding with about half of their subjects. And in a study done in Italy, researchers planted the false memory when you were a kid, you witnessed demonic possession. I do want to add that it might seem like we are traumatizing these experimental subjects in the name of science, but our studies have gone through thorough evaluation by research ethics boards that have made the decision that the temporary discomfort that some of these subjects might experience in these studies is outweighed by the importance of this problem for understanding memory processes.
How would you guys gauge that as an ethics board? Inserting memories of demonic possession and dog attacks. Would you let that happen to people in the name of science?
It would be up to the individual person. What do you mean, like?
Well, I mean, people will kind of agree to everything. I think they assume that if you're going to like a university or a hospital, they have a study done that it's not going to ruin your life, it's not going to kill you, you trust that it's been approved. Like, we don't allow human cloning, we don't allow a lot of stem cell stuff, that's iffy. There's
How
ethics.
do you know? Because they might be doing it behind their people's back.
Oh, I totally think that they're doing it underground somewhere, don't get me wrong. I have no trust in us passing that up as a species. I just don't think they're opening it to the public,
Yeah.
especially, other countries, that aren't as inhibited by such easily offended citizens as us. I think that stuff is definitely going on somewhere, and I'm excited for it because I agree with it. I think it needs to be explored. But this is different. This is taking a fully formed individual with a brain and memories of their own. What's that one movie, Eternal Sunshine? Jim Carrey in it. It was on this. They were implanting memories to help people get over their lost loved ones.
Sort of like the Truman. Is that one?
Kind of like that, yeah.
Where they took him and put him in like the TV setting, and he was raised like he thought it was every day, but here it was a TV show.
And that was for entertainment.
And it was for entertainment, and then he realized it, and he took that boat and opened it up.
He got out of there, yeah.
He got out of there. And everybody that was near him that would tell him, they would get rid of.
But this is talking about, sitting someone in a chair and getting them drowsy or hypnotized and telling them vivid stories about something that happens where they wake up and they think that they were attacked by a dog. Next time they see a dog, they're gonna freak out. Is that ethical for us to be experimenting when we don't understand memory? If they say it was,
It has to be,
has to be why?
because if it wasn't, we wouldn't know.
So,
If
and
they
that's
didn't
what the
do
board
studies-
decided.
If they didn't do the studies, we couldn't learn that information.
And that's what the board decided is, this might really mess with some people's heads, but
But
think of the good that can come from it, and she's
one
gonna.
person, sacrifice one person for the greater good of millions. They've been doing that since the beginning of time, so.
She hasn't named them yet. She will go through a couple, but can you think of any good that can come from me being able to insert a memory into someone else's brain?
Yes, like you can take away those people's fears. Like suppose a person, scared of water, and then you insert that they're a great swimmer and great things happen to them on the water, and that'd be a lot. That could be a lot better.
Great, yeah, definitely. Any other
Or
ideas?
fear of flying.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a big thing because everybody else.
Tell them about all these flights they've been on as a
And
child, and they were fine, and okay.
Who said if you were blind?
No,
I thought this was just that.
no flying. Because a lot of people have the fear of flying now since what happened to all these airplane crashes and stuff like that. And the boats, what happens if someone gets seasick? Maybe they can plant no, you'll be fine, the water's nice and calm.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you brought that up.
Because
You think
it's
that
like-
you can change someone's brain to
It's like-
inhibit
it's-
that
it-
physical.
When you get on the boat, it's not gonna be rocky, choppy, nothing, it's gonna be fine, you'll be fine, and so you won't throw up.
But we do that all the time anyway, because, you know, people always ask, well, I had this professor, well, how is he? Oh, well, he's boring, he's hard, you know, it's gonna be rough in that class. And, you know, you going into that class, the first thing you think is the worst. But, you know, after you actually take the class, then, you know, like, that was just that person's perception of the class. You know, that was just how that person looked. But they suggested me, you know, that all of this was going to be difficult and hard, and, you know, that's what I went into, you know, but it wasn't really like that. So, with what she's doing,
So if someone implanted in your brain, like, don't you remember? You had them first semester, you got an A.
not just...
You might go into that class and ace it.
Yeah, but not just that. Just like okay, I'm taking college algebra. If you talk to most people about college algebra, people are like, oh, that's just the worst. Math, I hate math, I can't do it. I didn't do well in that class. That class is just going to be just the hardest class you ever take. So when you go into it, you know, you're just thinking like, I'm never going to pass this class. That, you know, everybody said it was hard. Everybody, you know,
But
it's just too hard to do. And you kind of give up, you know, or you just let yourself, you know, sink into the, you know, I could never pass this class, you know. And that's just from the thoughts and suggestions of others instead of forming your own opinion about things. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, let's, we got 5 minutes left, and she will suggest a couple uses here, and that is question number 4 on our sheets. But we did just talk about maybe a couple things you could do. Feel free to use those.
We already did 3.
Yes, we did. Did you miss it?
you can go in and change it, and so everybody else can't do it.
They can change it.
They can change it, like Wikipedia, you can go in there and change and
Like a
say,
Wikipedia, I can change any information on anybody's Wikipedia that I want.
yeah, you could just say that he had 36 kids and he only has 2.
Right.
That's why most professors will not take Wikipedia answers. They want hardcore.
Well, what was the number one? I didn't get the Beetle and the bottle in
Which one?
the first one. It just closely resembled the Beatles.
Yeah, and it was
Oh.
making go to the bottles instead of the females. Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know,
Oh,
if
I
our
missed that.
whole goal of, you know, these survival instincts is to perpetuate our genes so we can have another generation so that this animal can keep existing.
See, in my
damage
first
the
day
species.
class, when I said that, all of you women looked at me like I was crazy, but I was telling you the truth. That's what we're put here for. We're put here to reproduce above and beyond anything else, beyond love, beyond reason. We're put here to reproduce as animals.
We will go over some logical fallacies in the next
But
class, and there are some that describe that view.
Okay.
I have a vocabulary word for that. It's called, give you a sneak peek into chapter 5. A naturalistic fallacy is the automatic belief that anything natural is therefore good.
It should be. All things natural were put here intended to be good, but us being humans and animals, you know, we changed those things into bad. Just
Killing
like,
other males over sexual reproduction is natural in some species.
say it again.
Killing the other males in order to...
Killing
Killing.
other
Yes.
males
Yes,
Yes.
they'll kill each other to reproduce. They'll also kill babies that aren't theirs.
to reproduce.
These are natural behaviors.
Right. Natural
Are they good?
behaviors to who? Animals or humans, because that's when you get the, you know, what.
Aren't you saying there's really no difference?
Okay. So they're not. We don't kill as humans. We don't naturally kill other males for females.
We don't.
Not naturally.
We don't.
No.
Really?
No. You don't hear too many.
Uh,
You don't hear too many killings because, okay, well, I want this lady right here, so I'm gonna go out and kill her husband. You don't hear too much.
Yes,
of
you do.
Not
Well, let me propose this. It is murder to kill another human. It is actually manslaughter to kill either your wife or a man if you catch them having an affair. We
Right.
have a reduced form of murder. We have a reduced punishment when somebody kills over the heightened emotion of sexual angst in that circumstance. We punish them less. We hold them less culpable because we understand that it is a natural reaction, that you are so filled with jealousy and hate and betrayal then that you might kill someone, and logical judges and scholars over the time have said, who wouldn't? We're not going to give them life in prison. We'll give them 7 to 15 years.
We don't naturally have, everybody doesn't have that natural killer. And just because I come home and catch my wife in the bed with another man doesn't mean that I want to kill him. I may want to kill both of them, but not just him, not just because that male, because I'm not.
It applies to both. It does apply to both.
And I may not want to kill him. I may be like, yay, thank you, now I'm free. I can go, and I can go fertilize 1,000 other acres. I mean, that might be how I feel. I mean, I may not, because I'm not.
And while people are
I'm not a
definitely
jealous
different,
person.
the law treats humans basically as all equal and all running on the same hardware, even though it's not true.
Right.
That is how it is written. But as a species, it is deemed to be a natural instinct to be angered and to possibly physically lash out in that situation. Is it natural? Yes. Is it good? That's where human morals and higher thinking come in to evaluate. And that's what we love to argue about. So
I don't think
please
it's
stop.
natural to want to lash out at people. I think that's what we have been taught. I think that's a form of suggestion. Because just because you're angry, we don't have to be taught to lash out. We can be taught to go sit in the corner and bang your head on the wall. You can be taught to, write 1,000,000 sentences. I mean, but that's just suggestion. Suggestion made us where when you're angry, you have to hurt somebody, And that doesn't have to be, because, I teach my kids when they're angry or you want to hurt someone, go run around the house a couple times. Run that anger off. Anything else, but do that. Pick up a rock and throw it against the fence 30 times. You don't have to use that anger for violence.
Okay, so that's getting into a nature versus nurture argument. How much is, what we are as an animal, and how much is how we are raised within our family. But, there's all sorts of countries that don't necessarily have any contact. Or let's use a tribe out in the middle of the jungle that has never even seen really the other tribes around it, because these do exist. We find them. Sometimes we go there and end up giving them horrible diseases because all the time, right?
All the time.
They have violence. We have violence in America. China has violence. Middle East definitely. If we're seeing it in every pocket of human,
Do we
is
know?
it nature or nurture?
Do we know they have
What was
violence?
the first murder ever in the history of mankind? It was
According to
Cain and Abel. So I mean they were the closest to perfection, and he still killed his brother. So
Why? Was it over anger?
it was over anger, and he was
Or
upset
was it
because
over jealousy?
Jealousy.
it was jealousy, and then jealousy, then what? Stirs up anger.
I guess, if you want to say that.
I mean,
But I would like
it's in our
to.
nature.
I would love to sit down and just have an 8-hour conversation with you one day. Talk about everything. 'Cause
Got something to say on everything. I also, though, I
like
try to
your
find a
mind.
TED Talk for everything, too, because it saves me some talking. And, they're brilliant, right? These people we're watching, the top of their fields, they're brilliant human beings that share years and years of work in 15 minutes. I can't do that for you. So I hope we're not bored by the videos, because I cannot do better than
One
these
question.
people.
Do you
Yeah.
believe in mental illness?
Yeah, definitely.
You do?
Oh, absolutely. I think we overdiagnose it. In this country, especially ADHD in children, I think that's a problem with our education system. I also think that it has to do with media, the amount that we switch their brains around our commercials. And even worse, we used to sit down and play one video game for hours. Now they have an iPad with 10 different short little games. They can't even concentrate on a single video game for an hour now. So how are we going to have them focus on math for an hour? Going back to nature versus nurture, I think we're nurturing them to be like boom, 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 colors, space, touch stuff.
I think they made ADHD up for somebody's lazy child.
That's what.
Because I don't remember that when I was a kid. I don't remember kids having,
There's a
ADHD.
difference though. Some kids really can't concentrate.
And some adults can't
Oh,
either.
My son has ADHD. if you brought him in without his medicine right now, he'd be all over this room.
Right.
But I think that's just him because if you sit him in front of this damn video game, he can concentrate on it. You know
So
what
it's like, should we be enforcing more self-discipline and
Yes.
less sedation?
Yes, because like when I was a kid, you bounced around this room, you got your tan high. You know, you got a spanking. These kids now, you can't do that. So they had that freedom to do that, you know, and they had that freedom for, oh, he won't sit still. Okay, well, he's ADHD. No, beat his little ass, and he'll sit still, and then you don't have anything else to worry about. But
This is
How-
my mom, I had a daughter who was really relaxed and chill. When my son came, he was like hyper. So she thought something was wrong with him. And I'm like, no, he's a boy.
It's
Like,
just
there's a
kids.
difference.
It's just
But
a
no,
difference.
she had to get him diagnosed and all this. I'm like, no,
it's
I
just
didn't
a
give him
difference
this.
in kids. Just like I was watching The Exorcist last night, and you know how many diagnoses they went through to figure out about, you know, what even before they got to she's possessed. I mean, when they came in and seen her bed bouncing, the doctor said, oh, well, it's just her frontal lobe. Please, person, explain to me how this girl's frontal lobe can make her bed bounce. You know, I didn't understand, and I was
They
watching
have to do that so that they could exercise them because there's a step.
before they even thought about the church and the exorcism of it, the doctor was saying, well, you know, have she ever cursed any? And he said no, and she's like, she's doing that now. You know, it's her frontal lobe. Once you've seen her bed bouncing on its own,
You should have done something.
there's no more human to that. You know, now it's more than just what this girl is doing. You know, so don't keep going with it. You know, psychiatric and things like that. Like, you know, they prescribed her Ritalin at first. You know, because that's what they thought. But I thought that was just the stupidest thing. You know, people. Everything is a suggestion to me. Everything is made up. Like, I don't even believe in the Bible. I believe that there's a higher power.
You missed our class on this.
I know,
You're
I
an
believe in
agnostic.
God, but I don't believe, because the Bible was written by man. So it's what's in there is what man wanted us to know, you know, and what man didn't want us to know. So those certain people, these 6 people got together and said, hey, well, I want to put this in there. The 7th person said, I want to put this in there. They said no. You know, so it's only them 6 now. So I can't believe.
What about the translators after the 6?
the translators? The translators translated what they wanted
What
to
about the
translate.
prophecies that has been fulfilled that were told
If-
hundreds of years before?
If
it
Let her
I
finish,
keep
let her
tell-
finish.
if I keep telling you
Yeah, you
that
gotta let me
the world.
talk.
Oh,
Yeah, you guys,
I'm
we got
sorry,
to
I'm
talk
sorry.
and stick in here. Class
Because
discussion.
the Bible wasn't written all within a year or 10
Right.
years or 100
Uh-huh.
years or even 1,000 years.
Mhm.
So just like how the heavens and the earth were created by God's Holy Spirit, the Bible, the Holy Spirit directed these people to write what they wrote, and it flows like the river. It flows just like it should.
Okay.
Just like right now, up until today, there's 2 prophecies left to be fulfilled. 2 or 3 left to be fulfilled in the Bible, and that's it.
What are they?
One is that there's going to be a cry of peace and security. Another
See that coming anytime soon?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Another one is the government is going to turn on religion, starting with, I think it's going to be the Catholics and working its way down. And
Why the Catholics if
Because
if
the-
Islam's in the position?
You don't think
It
that they
is.
already are because
Well, I think it's all happening right now. It's unfolding right now
I think
as
the
we
government
speak.
has already turned on.
But no,
it.
they
Absolutely.
turned on. They're starting to turn on religion. It's not like
Is the actual turn less than acceptance and leaning more towards condemnation?
that. I don't know.
I don't know that either, but I think when there's a difference between church and state, the government has turned on religion.
And
When the Catholics have their own rules, and well, not just Catholics, I'm just using them as an example, but have their own rules and their own ways of dealing with things, you know, versus the government's ways, then it's already a conflict. You know, and just like you said, you know, as far as, you know.
Is it a conflict or is it a separation? Because anti-disestablishment in our
If it's a
country is meant to
separation.
keep a separation, not a conflict.
If it's a separation, it's a conflict. And the reason why I say that, just because,
If you peacefully break up with a partner, are you guys fighting? No, you're
No.
separated.
but it's a conflict. Because why did you break up?
Because separate can coexist without.
Separate can coexist, but
Okay, what we need to do, define conflict. What is conflict?
I'm not saying there's a problem. You know,
Okay.
conflict doesn't have to be a problem.
Okay.
You know, so
Is it an
But what is the
inconsistency? Yeah.
definition of conflict?
Because I'm thinking of conflict as these two things are fighting, each trying to stomp out the other.
no, that's not.
When they're simply not connected, when they're simply separate, it might be inconsistent.
I mean, you
Conflicting information is they just don't match. Is that what you're
Right, but
defining
you being
conflict
a woman
as?
and me being a man, is that conflict? Because we just don't.
Our
match.
genders are inconsistent.
Right, but is that conflict?
I would
from
not
what you
call
said,
that a conflict.
I would.
Okay.
Because we are.
So then
humans.
the root of our disagreement here, because we've been studying arguments in this
Is
class,
the-
is not whether or not there's a conflict. It's the fact that I think a conflict is you trying to dominate the other, and he thinks a conflict is more of just an
difference.
inconsistency.
Right.
The information conflicts. It is not the same.
Right.
So therefore, we don't disagree at all. We just have different
Different.
opinions about one word, which is totally okay.
And most of my arguments I have with you guys is to get information because I want to know too. I look at myself as I want to know a little bit about a lot of stuff.
That's why, yeah, I agree.
So,
That's why we're here.
If I start something, it's nothing personal. I
No,
love all you
nobody's
guys,
taking it
and I
personal.
love to hear your opinions, and I love for you to tell me, hey, that's not right, or because I'm gonna keep it going. But anyway, I'm sorry.
No,
So,
no.
Back to the class.
You want to go back to the video?
I mean,
I guess I kind of lost where we were at on that.
No,
Well, we were
that's
talking
okay.
about different applications if you could implant memories, and she was about to name a couple. But did everyone answer that on their sheet? Did everyone come up with an application?
What was one maybe? I got a suggestion. Is that an application?
I think an application of being able to implant a memory was something more along the lines of you could erase someone's fear. You could make them not afraid of water. You could make them not afraid of planes. Like if you could. I think I'm going to skip this since we've spent some time discussing and we have some things to get through. One other one she gave was people that overeat or are addicted to like more unhealthy foods that can't get themselves to eat healthy. You can implant in their brain like, no, you love asparagus. Like you used to eat this all the time as a baby, and they'll have memories of it, and they'll have that positive association with asparagus instead of French fries.
Is that not suggestion?
It's suggestion, sure. And here
But
we're
it
getting
breaks-
onto
but-
like another conflict of definitions. I'm saying, implanting a memory, but yeah, they are suggesting something and that person adopts it as an actual memory that they have. So just any time that you can suggest something to someone, but the key point there is to actually be putting something in their brain. Not telling them about what your experience with something is, but telling them what their experience was with it, even though that never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And how that can impact how a person goes about their actions in the future.
Do you believe a person can be hypnotized?
I guess I have to because there's like scientific evidence of it. No one's tried to hypnotize me. My mom had tried to be hypnotized for smoking before. She said she can go under.
We just talked about this in psychology last week.
Yeah, what do you think? I haven't visited that science.
It's hard to. It depends on the individual person.
Yeah.
If they're
Weak-minded.
no, not weak-minded. If
Suggestive.
they're open-minded, actually,
Open-minded.
not weak-minded. So you can go in there. And it's just hard to tell because people can fake it. So
Yeah, and I would love to have someone try to do it. Maybe I'm not open-minded enough. Like, I'm so skeptical. I don't know
Me too.
if I could let down my guard to actually, like,
Exactly.
I think I'd be fighting it so hard that, like, if you were to tape it and then show me after that I was doing, like,
That's
Still
not
wouldn't
right.
believe it.
I've never even drank myself to the point of, like, not remembering anything. Like, I've never even been in that state of consciousness. And, I mean, I go out all the time, but I just, like, I don't think my body will hold the amount of alcohol that I take. Like, I never, like, I mean, yeah, I went to college. I've gotten sick from consuming alcohol before, but never have I actually, like, had so much and woke up somewhere and been like, how did I get here? Like, I've never had that experience, so I can't even imagine being hypnotized. Like,
I don't think people need treatment for addiction. I think people are just weak-minded.
maybe the first time you put the needle in your arm, but after that, it literally starts to change the chemicals in your brain, and like your brain is tricked into thinking it's dying because you don't have them. There is a point where I have to treat addiction as an actual illness. Not that they can't think through it and know the consequences, but that they also have this tainted element of their reasoning where they actually believe they're going to die from withdrawal. And in many cases, you can die from withdrawal. So they're not wrong. If they don't get those pills, they might die.
Anybody can take that?
Yeah, we just learned about that in psychology too, because your body, like, this is how your body is. Like, when you start taking drugs, like,
Their chemistry
your
changes.
chemistry changes, and then when you stop, your body tries to readjust, and then people lose, like, natural affection, natural feelings, so they think they need that drug to make them feel normal.
And they do. In fact, they do.
And it's not always all mental.
No.
Then it becomes physical.
Oh yeah,
At
like
the
your
time,
organs can
it
shut
can.
down. Your heart can stop from a lack of stimulus. Like if all it's
But-
keeping you up is Coke and you stop and you let that go out, your heart might not remember how to beat.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
And like alcoholics, people who drink every single day.
Oh, they're shaken
You
when they
cannot
don't have
just
it.
take the alcohol from them.
No.
You have to wean them off of it or they can die.
And it's just not the alcohol, it's caffeine too.
Yeah.
Because caffeine is one of the biggest drugs that we have.
Confirmation bias. We look for information that confirms what we already believe. We block out information that conflicts with what we believe. Sensitive topic, Bible stuff that you guys just kind of went through. Christy, you're educated, you're well read in that. You're going to block out, you have so much faith. You're not going to listen. And I guess religion, that's one of the safe things, like that's your stronghold. Go for it. But, like the science of like nutritional health, when, you want to argue over how much sugar is in a carrot, you might need to listen to those things. Other things like statistics, like we're maybe all trying to brush up on world history and politics here now that we see like, oh wow, people are dying, I should figure out what's going on, and there's all these different groups fighting. Really easy to not look at stats or look at what Islam's actually about or look at like what little part is actually the sect that's like terrorizing the world. Confirmation bias is to read stuff and be like, yeah, I agree with that. Let's go to war or let's not go to war, whatever you think.
Like I looked up what ISIL meant that I never knew.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, whoa, what does it stand for? That's what I looked it up and I was like, okay, that made sense.
And you look into the history a little more, and it's maybe not how our mass
I
media
don't
is
want to look into
portraying
history
it.
because the fact that the government could look at my computer and say, here's researching.
No, you are allowed to look at ISIS. Everyone in the world needs to read up on ISIS right now. Just don't join it.
No.
Don't
find
ask
it
for the
interesting.
list of secret military addresses in your secret mission, and no one is going to show up at your door. Please educate yourself.
I was like, oh, okay.
That's why I'll be looking up like how to make meth and how cocaine's made and what a coil boy is and like the stuff
So,
on
like, the guy
the
that-
stuff on my work computer, like yeah.
Some guy that I went to school with at Stark State, he looked at the formulas how to make bombs
Mhm.
because he wants to be on the other end when the bomb explodes. He wants to tell them how they
Yeah.
made it. That's his big job.
Yeah, and when you enter a profession like that, yeah, you have a really shady looking search. In between shopping for sweaters, I'm looking up how to make meth and how to chop cocaine and purity stuff and like burn off rates in your urine tests and like if you were to judge me by my search history and not know what my major's in, but it is there for you to learn. I encourage you to not shy away in fear. I've got some ISIS stuff on my computer as well. We should know this stuff.
Because
It's
the fact that it's relevant into this
very
world.
relevant. And to be able to parse out when we're watching the news, what they're saying might not really be true. It's what they want us to think. What are they leading us to think? What are they scaring us about in order to control our thoughts and our opinions? Do some objective research and try to find out for your own. I encourage it.
European scientists will tell you not to believe in God. They say that's a way, that's something that they put out here to control us.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
Since
that's
the beginning of, I think religion has more of that element, but not necessarily God and spirituality. I think when the religions start making rules about covering your hair, or treating a certain day of the week in a certain way, or I mean, certainly marriage and relationships was part of a moral code. Maybe, for better or worse, I mean, is it bad? I think all the religions kind of overlap on some key morals. But sure, let's get through confirmation bias. Some of our
American songwriter Paul Simons once said, "A man sees what he wants to see and disregards the rest."
This should cover our next
That doesn't
question.
apply to you,
I think.
right?
I apologize. I don't know.
Well, maybe that's just because you don't want it to. Like it or not, we as human beings tend to think that our initial opinions are correct, and when presented with the facts, we pick out the ones that suit our presumptions best. This is called confirmation bias, or the tendency to favor information that confirms one's own assumptions or preconceptions, whether they're true or not. Experts describe this behavior with a simple analogy. A Texas sharpshooter decides to go out and practice his shooting on a bar. He unloads dozens of bullets randomly and spots a few clusters of bullet holes. He then paints a bullseye over the clusters, making him seem like a really good shot. Sounds weird? It's called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, and your brain does it all the time. Why does this matter? Take a trip back to 1960, during the Kennedy-Nixon presidential debates. People who watched the debate on television saw a disheveled Nixon contrasted with a handsome and confident Kennedy. By looking at the person, they began focusing on points where Kennedy won because they wanted him to win. Contrast this with the listeners who, for the most part, declared Nixon the winner. The next time you jump to a conclusion, ask yourself, is it true, or do I just want it to be? The answer may come as a surprise.
All right, we've got our answer out of that, right?
Kind
Kind
of.
The people who watched it saw that Nixon looked like a slob and they didn't like him.
Right.
The people that listened to it, though, couldn't see them at all and actually thought Nixon did pretty good.
So it's because of the visual of the two people.
Sure, yeah. Be more attracted to someone who's in a nice tailored suit or someone in a baggy suit that looks like they have a court date later that afternoon.
I see. Look at you. Look how you say that. A baggy suit with a court date. Why does the baggy person have to be going? The person in the tailored suit is going.
It is a stereotype. It makes us trust that person less because they are not presenting themselves in a neat, tailored fashion. That is why.
Right. But I guess it depends on what.
Not that I have any disrespect for people with court dates, as
Not you.
many
Definitely not you.
many of people that I spend much of my time with have plenty of court dates. Okay, we got through that? Okay.
How?
Yes.
No, I'm just reading the next question.
Okay.
Aliens.
Yeah.
Just sort of like what happened in Los Angeles last weekend, where they were testing a rocket but didn't tell people that they were testing
Oh,
a
yeah.
rocket, and they kept on calling and saying that they saw some strange thing in the sky.
There's people that said that was not a rocket. They work with the military. They shoot off rockets all the time, and that looked like no rocket that they've ever seen.
I
What did
know.
it look like? Is this the thing that was like bowing out the big thing of light, or?
Yeah.
And then those fake alien things that they found.
Yeah, you know what? I kind of skip these things on Facebook. I have a class to write for you guys, so I try to pass those up. I'm gonna skip this video for now. Kind of just goes through a website and shows you different places to look for other sources and things that you can use to judge its credibility. I don't think we'll have
Like,
time.
don't use onion skin or whatever, that onion, that it's a false snooze.
I'm not sure what you're.
There's a website that you can get on, and it's called like the
Oh,
Onion
yeah.
Report or something like that.
Yeah, this gets more into, are they citing their information?
Yeah, that's what
Do they state
I got
their
on it just to see what it looked like. I'm like, yeah.
The Onion's it's really good commentary. You just need to realize it's satire. But this is acronym CRAP. Is the information CRAP. You would check its currency, its relevancy, authority, accuracy, and purpose. It's book information. We're missing a lot of classmates today, so I'm not really gonna hammer in the research skills. Let's get through some of the fun stuff we have here. The Panic broadcast. If you read, you'll see that in I don't don't know what year, I think 49 maybe. It was,
Aliens are coming in.
yes, after War of the Worlds had been published as a book, Orson Welles produced a play that came on the radio.
Oh, that was hilarious.
Yeah, they turned it on and it sounded like an actual news report that was, reporting a touchdown of aliens and describing it. I mean, it was fake, of course, but while people were listening to it, they didn't realize that it was fake and they started freaking out. Page 113 had this on it. On the evening of October 30th, 1938, a play based on H.G. Wells' novel, The War of the Worlds, about a Martian invasion was broadcast to the nation on radio. Many of the people who listened to the show believed that the invasion was real. Some people even smelled the poisonous Martian gas and felt the heat rays being described on the radio. Others claimed to have seen the giant machines landing in New Jersey and the flames from the battle. One panicked person told police he had heard the president's voice on the radio ordering them to evacuate. Now, of course, all these didn't happen. This wasn't all coordinated along with the radio broadcast, but that's speaking to earlier in the chapter and in the video we watched on memory, how suggestive we really are. If we're freaking out, all of a sudden we're filling in stuff in the sky, we're smelling things. Hypochondriac, that's a mental illness. They certainly feel and perceive things that aren't as intense as they're believing they
They
are.
have so many different things that is like unreal. I
Absolutely.
took abnormal psychology, and half of these were like, oh my God, like they really do exist.
Yeah, and these people, they really thought, and these were normal people. This was grandma, grandpa, mom, dad. Like, they really thought that the sky was on fire. They were really smelling like, oh my God, I can't breathe. Like, they really felt these things. I think back in that day, people were much less desensitized to fiction. You couldn't see what was going on. All you could hear was a very serious tone, and they're talking about aliens. You tune in the middle, like, no idea it wasn't real. Our perceptions of the world around us are easily skewed by social influences. Most people underestimate the critical role that cognitive and social factors play in our perception and interpretation of sense data, smells, sights, sounds. Although emotion has traditionally been regarded as the culprit when reason goes astray, studies suggest that many of the errors in our thinking are neurological in nature. In this section, we look at some of these cognitive and perceptual errors. So before I moved into that information, I wanted to look a little bit at the panic broadcast. I know that's not it. Let's look at this awesome rendition of the actual broadcast as played out by sock puppets.
I like
make it a little bit difficult for us today to believe or to picture in our minds what happened in 1938 when Orson Welles broadcast his War of the Worlds.
Reported that at 8:50 p.m. a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Groverville.
So on this, I want you to tell me what the aliens described as.
We take you now to Groverville, New Jersey.
Can you all hear it?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again, out of Wilson Pond, Groverville, New Jersey. Well, I hardly know what it is. Maybe you'll want to take some strange things from my eyes. I guess that's it. Yes, I guess that's the thing directly in front of me. Half buried in a vast pit. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's something I haven't mentioned in all this excitement, but it's becoming more distinct. Perhaps you've caught it already on your radio. Listen, please. Do you hear it? The curious humming sound that seems to come from inside the object. Something's happening. Take off! The top floor down there! Ladies and gentlemen, wait a minute. Someone calling someone or something like this. Turn on that black hole to the ear, yes. The eyes might be a face, might be all the way. Heaven. Something like out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one, and another one, and another one. They look like tentacles to me. I see the thing floating out so
We can't hear what this.
just looks like wet leather.
Wet leather? You said wet leather?
Yeah.
I heard you say a gray snake. What the hell?
Looking at it, awful. Eyes are black and they seem like a serpent of mountains. The kind of V-shape with saliva dripping from its quivers. Looks as if it's those quivers pulsating. Monster, whatever it is, can hardly move. Yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted. The professor moves around one side, studying the object, while the captain and two policemen advance with something in their hands. I say now it's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. Flag of truce. Those creatures know what that means, what anything means. There's something happening. Some shape is rising out of the depths. Send out a small beam of light against the mirror. What's that? See the flame springing from the mirror that looks like the advancing mist. It's on. Oh, it's turning into flame.
So yeah, turning your radio on to this was the equivalent of a live broadcast of blood and guts and war and hellfire, and people got really freaked out. Move on from it. I had another commentary on it where they actually had done the same thing in maybe Argentina did it, but this newscast actually set things up months in advance. He's like posting capsules and all sorts of evidence and getting these news stories to go off. So when they actually did broadcast it, people really believed it. And if you were skeptical already, if you had heard about the thing that happened in America and you were skeptical, that got turned around when you looked out your window and saw hordes of people running up and down the streets. Like 6 people had heart attacks. People finally caught on. I mean, people were packing up their cars and going, getting in what kind of accidents, breaking God knows what in the process of packing up the kids and the dog and going. Highways, traffic jams, people finally caught on to the fact that it was a broadcast. They raged and mobbed the studio. They burned it down. 7 people died in the fire as they burned down the, like, crazy that this was allowed to happen. I totally encourage you guys to pick through the slides or search it later. These panic broadcasts were nuts. Optical illusions. Your brain tricking you into thinking one thing when another is true. You can't help it. It's how your eyes work. It's how your brain works. The lines in between here are straight, but because of the placement of the black and white and the heavy contrast, they really do look slanted.
Looks like wavy.
Yeah, but if you were to take a ruler, they are straight lines. That, if you kind of, especially if you move your eyes from corner to corner, if you put your eyes in a circular motion, that thing gets really, really wiggly. Does that work as well on the overhead?
Yeah.
It's really bright on a computer screen. I mean, when you guys look at the lit up version of it, it's,
Oh yeah.
when it's backlit, it's,
It really looks weird.
yeah, much crazier on a computer probably than the overhead. Is that cat going upstairs or downstairs?
Right, I see that.
Why
Without,
did you think he was going down?
But how do you know? Look,
why do you think he's going upstairs?
how do you
I know. I'm just wondering because my first perception of it is he's coming upstairs.
Yeah, but then if you look at it, he can do either or.
It's down.
I think what part of the trick is they blur this paw out so that you can't really tell.
But how could you take a picture?
It looks like look like he's coming down.
You're at the bottom of the stairs
Yeah.
and take. I just don't see that picture.
I can see both perspectives.
I can't.
I think what it is, see, they blurred out this paw, so you can't tell if he's stepping on this or if he's stepping on this.
Right.
if you could see, then our minds would associate that with gravity, and you know where he needs to step in order to go up or down. But because you can't see that one paw, we're totally distorted. There's no references. It could be the ceiling at the top of the stairs or the floor at the bottom.
Sort of with like that picture of the young girl and the old
Yes.
lady. Which one do you see first?
And I know you guys see those in psychology, so I skipped the obvious ones. Here is our next question. We're going to talk a little bit about the dress in this video, but overall I just thought this gave some really good visuals and an explanation about the
With
illusions.
that dress from last year or whatever?
The dress. Do you want to know, Lily?
10 mind-blowing optical illusions.
So was that an optical illusion?
Sure, yeah, we're going to talk about it.
Third
There's a word
dimension.
for it.
Nothing appears abnormal about this Rubik's Cube until you realize it is a two-dimensional image. This illusion
Wow.
is created with a distorted perspective of an image that requires to be viewed at a specific vantage point to create the 3D effect. This is the same method used in the very popular 3D sidewalk art.
I've never seen a 3D
The
one. in
Ames
person.
Room.
I have. Sidewalk art?
The Ames Room illusion creates a cartoonish and very intriguing effect of drastic size differences between people and objects. By tricking your depth perception with an irregular shaped room, the walls, ceiling, and floor align in a way that will appear normal at just the right angle. This causes everything else in the room to appear to warp in size. Following
I
eyes.
love this guy.
Here is a simple but very effective illusion that makes it look like these little guys are watching you. This is done by manipulating the way you see perspective and the brain's natural ability to pick out faces and patterns. The head is actually concave, and this sets up a contradiction in your brain to make it look like it's turning to follow you. The dress. Whether you see black and blue or white and gold, this dress has caused debate and confusion. Though the dress is indeed black and blue, it has become a popular example of color constancy. Depending on individual perception, as well as current room lighting, the dress can be seen as either black and blue or white and gold.
I remember that one.
Circle illusion.
Yeah, that was everywhere.
It is easy to assume that
Someone
these
got a
dots
tattoo
are
of
moving
it.
in a circular pattern. However, they are not.
Like, that's cool for
Each
10
dot
minutes.
is traveling in a straight line while on its own path from one end of the circle to the other. By adding each dot one by one, you can see the illusion come into place.
Cool.
Motion illusions. These images are not animated, but they appear to be moving due to the cognitive effects of interacting color contrasts and shape positioning. If you're feeling skeptical, pause this video and watch as these images continue to wave, twist, and pulse. Animation illusion.
I believe on.
This
These
clever
are
and
cool.
old-timey technique creates a multiple
really
frame
cool.
animation on a single sheet of paper.
That
By
is-
manipulating the mind and eye, these still images come to life using a simple graded card.
That is awesome.
Drop-off room. This 3D painted room is enough to trigger one's acrophobia, as it seems to be a massive drop-off. This painting was created by master of optical illusions, Regina Silveira, whose work often contains a larger-than-life bent reality. Yes, no. Artist Marcus Raith specializes in optical illusions with his mind-manipulating 3D creations. A prime example of his work is this sculpture of the word yes that can be read from one angle, but moved to another angle and it morphs into the word no. Backwards chair. This chair appears as normal as a chair can be at first glance, but just wait until this man has a seat. It might feel surreal at first, but this chair is actually built in a warped and irregular way that makes it look like it is facing one way, but in fact, it is facing the other way.
That reminds me of the guy that does the TED Talk where he opens up the book and it does different things with the book, and then he flips the other page and it does something different on the page. And that's how he did all of his TED Talk. He just did page by page and described it in a different format.
I'll have to look that one up. Why believe weird stuff?
Because everybody's mind is different. what's weird to you may not be weird
Yeah.
to me.
We don't have time to watch that one in our 5 minutes, but that one went through the Virgin Mary on a piece of toast, a bun that looked like,
Sort of like that potato chip that looked like Jesus.
sure, yeah, all sorts of things like that, and you know that we want to see faces. Like for a while, like one of the arguments for Martians on Mars was that there were tracks, like it looked like right angles, which don't normally occur in nature. Like it looked like roads or pathways. They were called like Martian canals. Those turned out just to be like a shadow. It looked like there might have been statues, but that was just our human brain wanting to see faces.
Sort of like that
Basically, that our brain is meant to look for associations, and then we find them even when they aren't there.
Right.
We have time for one more. We'll do self-fulfilling prophecy. So please cross out the last two to remind me that we did not get to them. Those 2 points will be freebies. And we'll just watch this uplifting video about self-fulfilling prophecy and why we should stay positive. This is going to be the last question about how it affects our human personality. And this, Demetrius, certainly does have to be a suggestion.
I thought I could just do it.
So maybe you've had this experience before. You were dreaming something terrible, like you were a little child and your mother was yelling at you, or a giant evil baby was chasing you, or you saw the death of your wife. Whatever it is, you wake up feeling like shit. You say to yourself, this is going to be a shitty day. I just have a feeling. Then getting out of the shower, you slip and fall, and later you trip on the sidewalk and spill your coffee everywhere, and then you do it again. Your friend calls you and says she can't make it for lunch. Your job application comes back rejected. You burn your hand on the stove. There's no toilet paper. Desperate House rises a repeat. And you go to bed thinking, what a shitty day. I knew it was going to be shit. Now, I think we can see right here that there is nothing in the physical universe which is guaranteeing a bad day for our friend Justin. No, the universe doesn't care what kind of day it is. It's just another rotation of 360 degrees. But it's here that Justin decides in all his infinite wisdom that he's going to make a prediction about the day. The day is going to be bad. And all that bad stuff really does happen. So going to bed, Justin believes that his prediction was dead on. This is called a self-fulfilling prophecy, a false definition of the situation evoking new behavior which makes the originally false definition come true. Consciously or unconsciously, Justin created his own bad day. But he's no different than any of us. Self-fulfilling prophecies are inexorably weaved into all of our lives, and we go through life thinking that this is going to be a bad day, or I'm definitely going to get this job, or that student's going to do really well, or these banks are in trouble, so I ought to withdraw my money just to be safe. In every example, false definitions lead to real outcomes, like a bad day, or a good job, or a straight-A student, or a global recession. And the concept is old. See Oedipus, Macbeth, Star Wars. But the idea of self-fulfilling prophecy has much deeper connotations than Justin's bad day. Each and every one of our identities comes into existence by way of them. As cute little infants, we are psychologically no different from animals. We react to the stimuli around us based on genetic programming. We have no sense of meaning, no sense of ourselves, no identity. But as babies, our parents don't treat us like animals. No, they treat us like we do have identities. They talk to us like we can understand what they're saying. And what they're saying is basically this: we love you and you are there. They show us what it is to be recognized. Now, in order for that recognition to blossom into a self, the baby has to be courageous. He has to risk that first communication. Mama or dada. And it is a risk. The self is a very tumultuous thing to have. It's much easier just to stay silent. But those good parents have been very encouraging. We'll love you no matter what they say. We'll applaud you or mirror you. You can trust us. In this way, parents create their children's identities by way of self-fulfilling prophecy. They predict the identity and then organize their behavior so as to bring it about. And the more loving the parent, the more courageous the baby will be. Now, the self is not a prize. It needs to be worked on all the time. And this, too, is a constant process of self-fulfilling prophecy. Social reality is very flexible. It's subject to a variety of interpretations. We define the world and our place in it every single day. And as it was our parents who literally created our identities, our conception of how they see us remains a huge part of ourselves. like it or not, and it's the same with friends. And look, we are all continuously creating one another's identities, and it's all self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, Justin had a bad day, there's no question about that, and it was self-fulfilling prophecy. But one thing you didn't see was when I called him after the Desperate Housewives disappointment and told him about my own shitty day and listened to his. Getting off the phone, I said, don't worry about it, buddy. Shit happens. You can always vent to me, because I'm sure as hell I'm going to vent to you. He laughed and got off the phone, went to his bed, and thought, what a shitty day. I knew it was going to be shitty. But, well, you never know about tomorrow.
Alrighty guys, we'll call it a class. Thank you all for coming. Just a reminder, the scavenger hunts are due at the beginning of next class, at which time I expect you to have read chapter 5. In class.